Bam.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Cannabis Pros and Marketing Masters, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the cannabis industry's most influential brands and the talented minds behind them. I'm Nigel Despinasse, and today I'm thrilled to be joined here by Dee Sidhu, a true expert in the field of marketing. Man has had experience like across the board. When I say across the board, music to cannabis, very close and linked in nature, but very different places. And I'm honestly just excited to delve into his head and kind of see where he's been, where he's going, and what he's looking at. Um, D, it's a pleasure to meet you, man. Could you do everybody a favor and give kind of a quick background about, what your experience is, what your passion is, and where you're coming from with everything?
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me, Nigel. I appreciate the beer bros. Big fan of what y'all do. I'm a fan of the work y'all put in. I think it's amazing what you guys do for the community. I'll give you the short version. I kind of got my butt kicked a little early in life, and I felt like I needed to pick up and create opportunities for myself. And so somewhere along the way, I created this streetwear brand that I had in my head, and while the brand didn't really make it far, we were able to get it in and around the nation, and some parts of the world through the power of the internet. But what that brand did for me and really taught me at a young age was how to network. You know what I mean? Especially in the digital age, when it's kind of tough to connect with people, and when everybody's world moves so fast when you're trying to figure things out. It taught me how to do that. It taught me how to develop cadences and when not to press too hard. Anyways,
Right.
um I took that opportunity, a lot of what I learned and the things that I got beat up on, and I kind of listened, and I found a step into the music industry. And we built something special out of the garage in the San Fernando Valley, and we took it worldwide. And we did it indie, and we did it with no investment, with the money that we had and we could raise, and kind of just continue to pour everything back into the business, hoping and praying that there was light at the end of the tunnel. And
Mhm.
that was something I really hang my hat up on, just in my life in general. And doing that, I think a lot of exciting things happened over the last decade. I saw opportunity with cannabis kind of come in. At that time, I was working with some friends to create a creative agency in LA that really just catered to like filling voids on just cool shit. So if you had, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can cuss. Um,
Go
but I don't
for
know
it.
if if you were an owner of like a couple of hospitality venues, like you had a club, maybe you had a lounge. My team came in, we pitched you how we would program that, not just program it one day, but help me take that from you. Let me show you what operating your venue Monday through Sunday could look like, monetary, what revenue looks like, how much you're going to be spending, and what my role is, and how you eat. And really, it was something we wanted to build so that it was hands off for the owners, and we take your business not only to autopilot, but we make money. I was doing stuff like that in LA, having fun. We worked with EDC, Insomniac, Rolling Loud, the city of Los Angeles at one point. It's kind of interesting, and I won't ramble this long, but I think it's cool is because LA just bringing back Broadway, not on Broadway, which is huge because that
Mhm.
is focused on revitalizing the historic parts of Los Angeles. And when I was approached to do this in my career, it was for Broadway, which is really dope. If you know anything about Broadway, it's where all the old theaters are at. It's classic. It's got the old vintage LA vibe to it. So we did things like that, and I smelled, you know, all of this fantastic 215 stuff that was happening in cannabis. And I'm from LA. Being from LA, I'm always around cannabis, so I was listening. Had dabbled into a few things before 215, and so when I saw this stuff, I was like, "This is great." Love what some of my friends in the community had been building, but I saw opportunities early on then, and what I my in was noticing these big, gorgeous, beautiful dispensaries that weren't, that had already thinking of deep branding, already thinking of their voice and identity. They look gorgeous at the physical level, but when you looked them up online, you looked up their Google page, the website, whatever, weed maps, it didn't represent what these folks were trying to do. So I
Mhm.
took a meeting with some folks. Meetings went well, and I just was like, hey, let's just take it, just vibe with me for a few months. If you like the work that you're seeing, let's continue to rock and roll. And if you don't, then I'll go my way, you go yours. And um, that turned out to be a fruitful opportunity. That was me working hand in hand with some folks over at Project Cannabis before it was Project Cannabis, and that was my first step in. I got to understand how retail works. You know, I took it every opportunity to understand what fund check-in is like, what intake is like, what's a day in the life of security. You know,
Mhm.
what does what does inventory fulfillment look like? What's the assistant manager doing? What's the GM doing? Right? Bud tenders. I felt like that was a blessing for me to learn that very early on, and then to help shops come up, into a place where they can market and build themselves into having a voice and identity. And I still look back at some of that work that I did, and I thought it was incredible. And the short version is, I'm sure you'll get into it, but continue to go where cannabis went early 15, 14, or even 16, 18, 19. I had a hand in kind of working with the folks over at Lime Cannabis before Lime was what it was. Had a great
Mhm.
hand in, taking my opportunities and my chops over to beverage and helping the folks at Lahua. Um, Before they were in the state. They were walking out of some of the fantastic work they did in Seattle, Washington, and they wanted to enter the state. And I was able to show them how they could do that. I've had the opportunity to work alongside Zach Darling, and when he was at the Hybrid Creative, when we did some great work branding legacy brands and helping new folks into the game kind of understand, where do you start? Where do you start
Mhm.
and where do you continue to kick the ball every day? And I kind of hung my hat recently on my heart's been calling me up to Humboldt. It kind of aligns with what I do and what I believe in, why I'm so passionate about my home city and getting deeper into the cannabis universe, man. My heart just kept calling me up to Humboldt. I met Scott along the way, and Humboldt Family Farms kept calling my name. And a year and 3 months later, bro, we right here. We
That's what
right
I'm
here.
talking about. That is so. Aside from that being like a crazy epic journey, that's like a marketer's like, I don't know, kind of in line with what you were saying. I don't know what I can and can't say, but that's like a marketer's wet dream, bro, to be able to go into touch all of these different aspects and kind of see what life is like at every different level and role across this part of the industry. Lets you really be able to speak to people who are either in that or are facing individuals in that role.
Mhm.
So that's like, and reeling it back to funk volume and everything, man. Like Dizzy Wright, Hobson, like
Oh,
individuals like that were people who I were bumping growing up. You know what I mean? Like it was like that mixtape era. That was when like Cushion OJ was popping, like a bunch, just like
oh,
it was a time where like the streets were flooded with mixtapes, man, and like super influential into the time that I came in smoking. And it was it's crazy to go around with uh just like a want to create and like play a part in people and how people experience things, and
mhm.
having that lead you all the way down this yellow brick road to Humboldt, California, where you're seeing these massive trees of pot and getting able to like brand and build things that are, probably a part of people's concerts experience now, probably a part of people's end of their day ritual, starting their day, really playing a role in kind of people's lives, to be honest. Like it's so hats off to you on that, man, because
Good.
I have a trillion questions, honestly, but
Hit
to
me.
to just start it off, man. Yeah, man. It's like in terms of where you started and everything with Funk Volume, and like even before that, right? Like you said, you're LA native. So you got to see like the full breadth of cannabis really hitting its roots in the beginning and like starting to find its place in legality in the US. And like that's a really weird place to be in context, just because it's not anything like it was now, which like, I'm sure everyone knows to some degree, but like when you're out there and like seeing shops get raided and like really seeing how the experience was before there was like guardrails, like when you're bowling put on things,
Mhm.
like, what was that like for you? Were you a lot more involved in music and cannabis was kind of just around? Has cannabis kind of always played a role in these things? Like what you're growing up in LA? Tell me what that experience is like for you and how you get involved in music.
Man, that's that's a great question. I think it's something that I'm still digesting, and it's because it moves so fast. I feel like, I mean, we went from big mason jars and chopsticks to being able to hold things, and that shopping experience. I mean, I still look back to some of that stuff, and it just felt like, wow, man, like we're here. I remember there was a shop on Melrose that I used to shop at all the time back in the day, and it was just like crazy that like I could go in. It was funny because Platinum Motorsports was across the street. You got this big premiere, they're chopping up $100,000 cars, $250,000 cars across the street. It's like the weed shop, man. So um
That is crazy.
it's crazy. And I've always had an optimistic mindset from it, because it just depends on the lens that you wear and the experiences you have in life. And I see things like that. And as tough as and everything that's been thrown to us as an industry, the small, I say small, but there are major problems with the raids and theft and regulations and stuff. And I mean, we could sit here all day and write a list of the things and the grievances, the shit that we have. But I look at all of the pluses and how far we come, and I that's what keeps me in the game, because every day I wake up, I'm like, whoa, more opportunity. Whoa, that's interesting, right? And I think having that take on it, having me always just looking at things like, I feel like I can see how I can bend and fold that to my best interest and catch a wave has been amazing. And I think California, just speaking for California, even when I look at NorCal and SoCal, the markets and how they've expanded and differentiated themselves, it's fantastic, man. Is it tough? Hell yeah. Is it
Yeah.
hard? Do you want to punch air some days? Most days, yes. Um, but it's exciting. It was enough to pull me in, and I raised an eyebrow, like I said, when I saw it. I was like, man, like these, like I had nothing to gain. I was throwing parties, I was doing my thing, I had access to weed, right? So, but when I saw this, I was like, this is crazy. I love the idea of being able to help and market in its infancy, especially coming in from indie music and understanding the hurdles and stuff that I had then too. I don't ever compare some of those hurdles. Those hurdles don't make sense to most folks' minds, but
Right.
man, I mean, I talk about we caught flight when CDs were making a transition to digital, right?
Yep.
Digital and radio are fighting, right? They're like, you can't give my music away for free. What do you mean we can't give your music away for free, right? DSPs are making a rise. You've got Spotify, all these great platforms. Apple Music was coming into play, and we figured out a way to make it work. And I'll be honest with you, we still sold CDs, and like, I think it's just you have to listen for opportunity. And I was listening back then, and I was seeing things. Um, and a lot of my career went that way. And I think it just helps me appreciate things. And that's if you looked at it systematically, my curiosity landed me at Weed Maps early before I even really stepped into retail. But that's because I wanted to
Hmm.
go in, and I know everybody can feel a certain type of way about Weed Maps, but again, I don't let my personal experience dictate what I'm trying to learn from the game, right? News, everything aside, let me go get my real approach and what D feels he can get from the situation. So I like what Doug Francis and Chris Beals were doing earlier with Weed Maps. And Weed Maps early on was just listings. Where can I get my weed?
And that's like a something that I think people probably see the behemoth that Weed Maps has become now, and like kind of branched off into different verticals and things like that. At the time, Weed Maps was not a publicly listed company. It was not working on a bunch of different integrations or menus or anything like that. Like you said, it was straight listings and
Yep.
being able to see what, like, where can I buy weed? That was pretty much it. It was Apple Maps for where could I buy weed. And like
Yep.
that single point of access though changed the game for a lot of people, which, like, I think it's, like you said, it was something that you came in and game teaches you. You know what I mean? Like, you get what you can get from the experience. And like at the time, Weed Maps was a home run slugger. So like, yeah,
Mhm.
definitely dive into that, because I know you were working on their social media and everything. So like, how was, because you set the stage essentially for what I feel like they had over the past couple years, had an extremely successful marketing campaigns, whether it was like trade marketing, their socials, or just direct to dispensaries and like interacting with people.
Yep. I mean, a lot. It was an interesting time, and I spent a short amount of time there because of opportunity again, and that kind of went hand in hand. I mean, from there, I feel like I spent about a year and some change at most of the places that I kind of had parked, to sit in a seat, and it was because I just was like, I learned a lot, and I was like, okay, you know, I could kind of take what I've learned here, and not only just help elevate my career, but take everything that I'm learning and kind of put it into one grand pot and seeing if I can make a greater impact at wherever it is I'm trying to go. And with Weed Maps, it was interesting because, like to your point, it was just listings. Pages hadn't existed yet, right? And going deeper into some of the other set of product offerings that they offer now, those were just ideas. And it was crazy because I would walk in sometimes and just like, and I would spend a lot of my time there trying to build some of the social stuff, but it was the organization that came. I don't like to take flowers that aren't mine, but the organ, and I remember the gentleman's name. I won't name drop because I don't like to do that, but
Yeah, I
he and his
got
team
you.
did a fantastic job at building a lot of the systems that were already in play for the social side. Dams and stuff that folks still don't use today, SOPs and stuff. That was humming. I wanted to understand and use my time and get into this. I mean, getting into Weedmaps back then was almost like winning the lottery. And I wanted to understand, how does media work over there? What are they up to? What are the tech guys doing? Right. And I spent so much of my time there spending at least a week's time routinely at every department. Because like the way I treated retail when I got into retail is because I wanted to be as like, because I didn't know how long this was going to last. And I didn't know what was going to happen because at the time cannabis was going super crazy, super fast. So at least I
Hmm.
would have a great understanding of how this animal works if I ever walked away, right? And
Right.
that was probably, I still use it today because when I do talk to some of the great folks over, in Weed Maps, again, you can feel about however you do. I currently don't use a lot of their products, but when
Hmm.
I'm talking to them, it's helpful to understand where they're taking that stuff. And I love to understand where, what they're seeing in new markets. So it was helpful for me again to get in and understand the lay of the land of how one of the biggest operators on the digital side at that time was positioning themselves and where they were headed. Um, but so I put the cart before the horse. That get opportunity came before retail. And so when I got to retail, and I was like, okay, what tools do I want to help plug and play in from the marketing side? It was easy for me to understand, build your brand identity. So we didn't plug any tools in. You can go to Project Cannabis. We started with GVC, and it was, let's build identity. Let's show the folks in North Hollywood who the shop is. And there were a few other shops in and around the way. And so I like to lean on humanizing, right? And that's kind of what I live as a social kid, is going deep into that. And so at GVC, I felt like what we did is we represented that shop as being in the Project Cannabis universe. Like, there were 4 or 5 doors that they had. That was the North Hollywood shop. It had the music vibe to it. You knew if you came in around everybody, it's like the around the way location where they know you by your first name to greet you. You're probably getting a dap, right? Very visual heavy on, like, their Instagram was very visual heavy on the folks that worked there. So you felt like
Hmm.
you were, when you went to the page, it wasn't product focused. Again,
It's like, I know that guy.
right, and I was thinking more or less like how you not get deleted back then. So I'm not new to social media. I'm quick to take away what I learned in music, what I learned, throwing parties, bro. There's only limitation to how much alcohol you can advertise, right? It's more about the vibe,
For sure.
right? Who the patrons are coming to the parties, your events. So I put all of that forward, and it was the most fantastic thing ever. I mean, that shop ended up being one of the most premier shops in their ecosystem, and I'll argue that. But Weed Maps and that experience kind of have followed me throughout my career to today. I mean, it's still, because if you don't use their services, you have to have a clear understanding of how you're going to exist outside of their services.
And it goes back, I feel like it's also part of like a meta conversation, right? Because with what cannabis is right now is a massive market split up into segmented markets of people trying to fight to create an image that's bigger than a commodity, right? Because
Mhm.
a lot of people at the end of the day are going to say weed is weed is weed. But not if you're doing things like that. Not if, again, like you said, you're leaning into humanizing and creating an identity and building a community that you can engage with and who really like will rock with you as long as they know you're providing good product and you can stand behind it, right? And I think being able to put those elements into a company and like being able to really build those things from the ground up, kind of the things that you got from working in the field with music, working with Weed Maps, and going into these retail spaces and coming from ground up, like all positioned you to get the different skill acquisitions to move into the CMO place that you're in today. You know what I mean? It's like all different pillars and blocks of kind of what create a full vision on, I see this brand, I understand this brand, and I want to take it to the next level. So like
Mhm.
coming from that, right? Like where, because I know you worked with Ursa,
Mhm.
and it's like we're working with some of the premier extract brands at the time in California, which like also not to mention, I'm gonna flex your shit for you, man. Like it
Appreciate it.
is no, yeah, of course, dude. Like I think people don't understand that this is Sonoma, this is Napa, this is like the heart of the industry across the world, right?
Yep.
And in a place like California, man, for you to build something that has notable success and is leagues above competition is one of the hardest things in the world. It's like the difference, and I'm not going to say any states because I feel like that's not doing them a service, but like, it's like playing basketball overseas versus playing in the NBA. You know what I mean? Like it is leagues different from what you're trying to do. You know what I mean? So like, hats off to you on that. But to kind of go that next step with it, right? Like, how does Humboldt Family Farms come into the picture? I have a friend that worked there that I want to ask you about afterwards, but
Sick.
how, how does all of that come together to kind of create what you're looking at and the vision that you're building now with this?
Oh man, Your Honor, yeah, you got me today, bro. Good question after good question.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
A lot of it is, I mean, what really won my heart over working indie rather than chasing major opportunities in music was I've been the small guy a lot of most of my life, and it's helping the small guy who's got the talent, right? He doesn't have access to cash, maybe not access to tools. Um, you know what I mean? And when so I saw that in indie music, was it whether it was Hobson and just rocking fresh out of the Tamika Wright relationship, and you know convincing and working. And it's tough because sometimes there's just so many comparisons. But I could sit on this all day between indie music, between what happens with the heart, the gut wrenching, and the hard work that comes in, and sometimes not seeing light. But um, I was personally drawn to helping others, and that comes from why I'm a big community leader and I'm a student of communities. It's just because I believe in the power of helping. I feel like you got to, and I feel like when you're in a better position, I feel like the only karma rewards those that reach back and pull up others, and I wouldn't be here today if somebody didn't reach back, hands down. And I won't mention that gentleman either, but that man pulled me up, you know what I mean, and changed my life. And so I believe in that. And so in indie music, it was working with the kids that didn't have that opportunity. And Scott and team were crushing it. I feel like even Ursa and team were crushing it before I got there. I had been introduced to both the Ursa camp and the Humble Family Farms camp through the
Mhm.
industry, which also felt good because that feels like you're doing good work and it's recognized um, by people that matter. And so at that time, when I came to Ursa, they needed an uptick, and it was like again, I think it's comfortable to talk. We can talk about this stuff now, but a lot of people had certain, ways that they looked at distribution a couple of years ago in the cannabis space. It was scary. Um, I was ready to play very close with Herbal. I loved their team. I loved a lot of the folks that came onto their team. I had a great deal of respect for their sales team because I knew them before they got there, and I know what it takes to be a salesman, saleswoman, salesperson in California. You got to have tough ass skin, and so if you ask anybody, when I was leading the Ursa and Walks team, we worked hand in hand. We rode in car rides with Herbal. Like, we were selling the product shoulder to shoulder, right? We didn't just hand it off to them, say, okay, let me know what revenue is right. Like, it was boots in the ground. We lace it up with you. We take the W with you. We take the L with you. And I feel like that was super helpful in me helping the team and my team really getting Ursa from where it was. I won't talk revenue, but it was in the couple hundos up to right and where it was really an
Yep.
animal. But that's teamwork. It's teamwork, and I wanted to make sure that, and that was like, I mean, I had never had a company that decided to invite me and my partner out. I got to see Arcata for the first time. I'm from LA, never seen it. Furthest on gone was Santa Rosa, right? My family, maybe the Redwoods, but that's like on Dad's time.
Right.
So it was beautiful, you know what I mean? And so I wanted to help. And that's when I met Scott. And, these folks were doing great things with Humble Family Farms. This is kind of post Herbal and that whole thing. And grassroots kind of was, grass doors thing was kind of coming. I saw an opportunity to kind of
Mhm.
help. And it wasn't just what was going on at HFF. When I spent a lot of time up in the Arcata area, I got to visit a lot of these small farmers. I went to Willow Creek. I went to Trinidad. I went to McKinleyville. I went up to the hills and the sticks. I had buddies that would take me out to the Cuddy. I went in a little plane ride and flew in somewhere in a little like two-seater, right? Flew into a farm, bro, gangster, right? And so I'm
Yes,
here. I'm hearing stories about folks, and these, we all know these stories, right? It's the old
Mhm.
legacy stories. It's one thing to read about it. It's one thing to hear about it from a third party. It's another thing when you get it from the horse's mouth,
The
bro. And
source. Yeah,
killed me, broke my heart. And you know what I mean? And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. What do we got to do to help represent these farmers up here, right? And these folks have been serving packs to this, not just the state, but the nation since I was a kid. That same weed that I was telling you about, I knew about all around LA. That's where it's coming from. You know what I mean?
for sure.
Um, all of that stuff. So I was like, I want to help. And then so it started with reorganizing, getting things in, moving. We work with four small farms, not including Scott's farm, Humboldt Family Farms. So, Humboldt Family Farms is an umbrella of five small farms up in the Humboldt
Mhm.
County. Sun grown farmers. These folks are working with the soil. They work with the soil. They respect the soil. We're talking generation over generation of farmers, right? And so
Right.
we walk their products into the supply chain. I represent their products and Scott's products. And I can't tell you how excited I feel after, we're sitting here in October 2nd now, bro. And it feels good. It feels good, right? The brand's on an uptick.
Absolutely.
We're stocked with some of the finest retailers in the state. I love my partners in the retail section. I think you've seen some of the great work we've been doing to represent Sungrown and the Sungrown market space. And so, I think, yeah, when I look at it like that, I was like, how can I not help? How can I not be a part of this? This is just amazing.
And that is I feel like a lot of parallels, kind of like you were saying with indie music scene and cannabis, is like you have these group of people who don't, the authenticity comes from like being in the shit, for lack of a better word, right? And that emanates through music. That's why people feel something when it's raw. It comes from, what conditions you're subjected to, and like
Mhm.
that travels over into the work that you guys have been doing with these people in Humboldt. People
Yep.
came up to Humboldt, to live an alternative lifestyle, grow food, and raise their families together. And cannabis just happened to be one of the crops that sold a lot. So like that's the way that the path took with it. But,
Yep.
like you said, it's heartbreaking, man. You have these people who were just doing what they know and what they're best at because they're providing something that like is untouched across the spectrum of the US, if not the world.
Yep.
And you have helicopters coming over and like people chopping down their crops and like, hurting livelihoods. And, I think you guys have done a really good job of honing into that model of working with people who do an amazing job doing what they do, but maybe don't have the strongest marketing chops in the game,
Right.
or ability to get distribution or things like that, or their way of doing both of those things before is now not, the most savvy or legal way to go about things. And
Yep.
it's really cool that you guys have like honed into a model that essentially gets like allows you to be the muscle for them on those ends, and really give them superpowers in places that they might not have, and them lending their talents for growing great weed to y'all.
Hmm.
It's like what Flocano tried to be at some point. I feel like is kind of like what a more fleshed out model is what you guys are running with now, and like doing a great job with it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And that kind of just is it, and it does come down to like, I want to also credit the retailers. Our retail partners are fantastic. You know what I mean? Because and in order for this all to work, everyone has to be protected to some point. And part of what, Humble Family Farms does when we work with some of the small partners is like, you know, over the years, some of the farms that don't exist that were serving the nation got beat up on price per pound, right? Or whatever. And so, that starts in supply chain. You've got to have some sort of a game plan and understanding of like what the value of your product is, right? I'm not saying that things got to be so priced so high that they're out of reach, but also, there's got to be something where it makes sense, and so that everything can exist, and there's enough for everybody to put some, food on the table, right? And then also access to quality flower products. Um, I think it's important. And so I think that's kind of what we also do, and it's an interesting problem to have. And I wake up with every day, but it doesn't give me nightmares. And I think the other caveat in that though, and what I've personally seen, I can't speak for other brands and others, but we see in these reports that the pre-roll category coming back. Why?
Hmm.
Quality product. Right. And
Yep.
folks are down to pay for quality product. Right. And we learned that they were like, you know what I mean? And $1, whatever is probably not going to be, the jam. So I'm so happy to see the intersection between that where folks are like, yeah, dude, I'm down to pay, value to price where it intersects in a nice spot. And so for Sungrown, I think that's fantastic. What I'm seeing and what we're our partners is recognizing. Um, it's just I think it's a beautiful time in the space. So I couldn't be more excited to going into 2025 with that.
Absolutely. And the the single-handed, I think, best part about Sungrown is that I still believe it has yet to have its day in the light in terms of like industry-wide appreciation, which I know you can definitely speak to, but it's, you get a whole new spectrum of flavor, of
Mhm.
smell, of potency, of different things that pop up. I mean, we have I want to say Sherbinsky's crew came
For
out with like a
sure.
study that was, yeah, that was coming out with like a study looking at the different profiles of what comes out of sun grown. But it is, I talk to some people about this and I think it's really interesting. You have a bunch of people who have, been underground for so long that they've had to breed plants for certain qualities. And
Right.
like one of those qualities of what's been happening with indoor is bag appeal, even though bag appeal doesn't necessarily translate to the best quality cannabis that can exist. And so,
Hmm.
maybe they've been focused on doing that because it sells for a higher price point, but that isn't wholly what's giving the consumer a better experience. Whereas like maybe a lot of sun grown, which I've seen some sun grown that has stupid bag appeal, but like that isn't the only fact. You know what I mean? That's like not the only factor that comes into play with it. So it's like I think, as consumers become more educated and people start to consume a wider array of things and not just the indoor bud that, is in this Mylar bag that is, whoever is saying that brand is the best. It's like people are going to start trying different things, get different profiles and
Yep.
experience that for a way that like will give a greater appreciation of sun grown. Cause like I said, I just don't think that it's had the level of love that it should. Um, because people have looked at it as biomass for so long.
Well, it's that part, Nigel, and I'll tell you this too, bro. You know what the other part is that we've had to hide for a long time. It wasn't safe to be in the sun. That's
Hmm.
it. Like
You
you
have to
just
move
wasn't.
inside.
You had to go, you had to. Otherwise, they were going to raid you. They were going to come,
Hmm.
put you in bracelets in front of your family, steal your harvest. So we had
Yep.
to go inside, right? Like that's just off top. And so now I feel like,
Hmm.
the conversation, this is, it's really should be, is it safe to go outside now? It's safe to be outside, right? Um, and then I'm just like, I look at the foods and stuff that like, we consume. A lot of us can't wait to get to the farmers market, right? Get first pick at some of the stuff that, the local farmers brought down, right? Especially down here, we're hot on it.
Hmm.
It, Even when I get my lady raw flowers, I go to the local farmers market, farmers market, and so there's that. You know what I mean? When you look to brighten your day, you go run outside. The sun hits your face. I just think there is a different component to sun grown. Even when I was doing beverage, what really swung me over to come play in that space was that at that time we were talking about producing a full spectrum product. I was like, absolutely. You know what I mean? So I think that there
Hmm.
are there are differences. They're pretty line in the sand differences. But I think there's more than enough room for both indoor and outdoor sun grown products to exist. Um, I just like sun grown.
Yeah, I get that. And I think again, it comes down to like the segmentation and breaking up of like individual markets within one massive market. I think one, there's already going to be more than enough product to be able to choose from. But then you have to think about things like, environments in the United States that aren't suitable to grow sun grown in, right? Like I'm from Louisiana. I'm living in Louisiana right now. It is so humid here, bro. There's no way outdoor plants are going to happen unless you have, unless you breed cultivars that are made to withstand something like that. But
Right.
maybe I still want some champagne from Humboldt that's outdoor grown and is different. You know what I mean? And like that is where I make, because I don't think it's a whole one for one type of comparison, but when it comes to wine and weed, like I mean, they just had the documentary that dropped with I know Kevin Jodrey was in it, Burner was a part of it, all that stuff.
Beautiful.
Uh you watched it? I haven't seen it yet.
I just started. I saw it popping around, so I caught like the first few minutes of it.
Okay, I'm trying to watch it soon because I really do think that that's like from a mass market perspective, that's what it's going to be. Because kind of like you were saying, right? Like there should be a section for everyone to play in. That's just what value is. You have different value tiers and pricing tiers of how a market works. You've got Elephant's Growth, which is I mean, you're LA. That's the stupidest ounce that you could ever buy, and then
Right.
you have the $5 bottles of wine that like people are going to buy because they want to go have a picnic and they don't really care what it is. They just want something that's bubbly.
Hmm.
Um, but that opens up, I feel like, when you take the borders down in terms of being able to ship product and kind of have like a greater market than this, because California's had this market that's been growing for so long
Yep.
inside these borders that it's had to escape out of the borders through illicit means. You know what I mean? Otherwise,
For sure.
everyone's going to get laid waste to, and that's just what it is.
Yep.
Same for Oregon.
Yep.
So, I guess the with the way that you guys operate with working with small farms, is there any want, I guess, or any opportunity that you guys are looking at to expand out beyond California? Or is it something where you guys are like, this is the product that we know, this is the product that we grow, and we kind of just want to put our name behind that? Or is there like, other outdoor growers in different states that are appealing?
No, I think there definitely is appeal in other states. And I think there's a lot of cool things we could do with genetics and stuff like that. And this, I mean, a lot of that stuff goes a little over my head, but Scott is kind of working on the next phase of our business with that. Because I think it can be an ebb and flow of balance in California and other markets that are ready for Humble, that are asking for Humble. Um, I think they kind of are. I mean, I was watching a 50 Cent show the other day. I think it was Power. There was somebody
Yeah.
smoking a blunt, and the character's like, where's that from? She's like, Humble, right? Where the best weed comes from. So I think, like, right when even today's pop culture still references that as the unicorn mecca area for, producing some of the great flower. I think like a marketing appeal for sure, fire,
Hmm.
right? And if you figure out ways to take that, across the nation, absolutely. But right now, until we kind of carve that out, plenty of work to be done here in the state. It's been a very fast year, but I couldn't be more excited with the progress we made. I mean, dude, like we did Cali Roots, amazing. Being able to sell with the Embark team at Cali Roots and to be able to sell at a festival blew my mind.
Hmm.
State Fair blew my mind. Outside, grasslands, outside lands blew my mind. You know what I mean? And it's just one of these, one after the other after the other, and it's just like, okay. Yeah, and PuffCon was just down here in LA. We're not in the flower
Yep.
industry. I still salute what the guys are doing in other lanes. And I was driving down because I was at the LA Convention Center for something else, and there was so much traffic in town. I'm like, this is not all just cars. It was all this dab ass, bro. It was amazing to see. Lines around the block for what looks like a concert, but it was for PuffCon. Come on,
Hmm.
that's amazing, dude.
That's a cannabis event, bro. That's crazy. That's wild. And I feel like
Loved
that's
it.
that's the something that you are uniquely suited in, is this area now, because we're like, I think in the last, I want to say maybe 2-3 years, are coming into this space where you're seeing a big merging of cannabis and events, right? Like you said, outside lands and grasslands, and uh I'm absolutely blanking, but there's Jars Cannabis in Michigan is partnering with a dance music festival out there, and like you're starting to see the intersection of you know uh these cannabis brands with these music festivals and venues and things like that. And like, it's, I don't know, is there anything in you that wants to get involved in that? Because experiential marketing, I feel like, is a massive part of cannabis. It's what a lot of
Yeah.
people are looking for. Like Hall of Flowers, I feel like, is a perfect example of that, right? Like you bring people into an environment where they can really get to know what they're smoking on, what they're buying, what they're looking at. And you coming from one, just like working with artists in a music perspective, but then working on these crazy festivals that are now like world renowned, like Rolling Loud,
Oh my God.
EDC, crazy, man, insane. So it's like, do you see a space where you're going to be, I guess, at that intersection? Are you going to be working in that intersection? Are you excited to be working in that intersection, I guess, to say? Because I know
I
you got
see
a
it
lot on your
coming.
plate.
No, I see it coming. I see it coming. And the day that it arrives, man, yeah, I'll definitely figure out a way to participate. You know what I mean? Cannabis goes hand in hand with arts, music, live performance, right? You hit a quick joint, you eat an edible before you go to the art gallery with your homies. You know, like
Yeah.
it's very much a part of like a lot of the the creativity or when you're in a creative environment.
Mhm.
So when it arrives, I'll definitely be ready, man. I think it's already going to happen. That's part of why I'm excited for 2025 with Gavin Newsom signing in, giving some support to the lounges in California, right, with the food and being able to have some sense of production value with like comedy nights, music nights, whatever, poetry night. I think it's sick. When you if think a lot of what I was doing back in the day, and a lot of other I wasn't the only one. A lot of folks were doing this to help program different parts of the city, but that was what we were doing, right? It ain't just sub, but it was liquor. A lot of small venues. I mean, people didn't go to big venues all the time. They went to around their way, whatever they liked that was close to their hood, their city. Without traveling far. Let me go hit the local bar or whatever and see what they got. Oh, it's poetry night today. Oh, or it's whatever tonight.
Mhm.
I'm excited for those things happening because I feel like once we get those off the ground, we'll able to have be able to do what House of Blues and others did down here and around the way where they had certain nights that they just owned, right? They just blew out the competition. I see those days coming, and man, it's gonna be crazy. Because if PuffCon can draw a line that big, imagine what you could do with a real big like physical location, right? Like that's where it's at. I'm gonna pull up.
Mhm. And that's like it's like in my mind, a way to make that pie of consumers bigger, right? Is
Yep.
by allowing cannabis to cross pollinate between all these different types of events and kind of opening it up for not just the heads. You know what I mean? Because I feel like that is the cannabis consumer doesn't look like anybody. The cannabis
Right.
consumer is anybody, right? So
Mhm.
I do think that the event space is very like ripe and open, especially like you said, with Newsom signing this bill that allows for people to be able to have food and beverages there. Like it's a big game changer because with cannabis, right, it's an incremental step to get anything. With
Right.
with alcohol, in most ways, it's like it was prohibition and then it was not, and then it kind of grew with the our nation growing. Um,
Mhm.
but we're fighting tooth and nail at every point to get cannabis assimilated into different areas of our
My God.
businesses or our communities, and which is, you know, we all have our own gripes with it. But I do think it all is playing a part in changing the narrative around kind of the role that cannabis plays. Um, and like we each, as people in the industry, we have a role in changing that narrative.
That's right.
And I think a big part of that is people coming from this like diverse experience set, right? Like I think there's a lot of gripes and moans about individuals who come from like CPG and try to just like templatize that to cannabis because that's not really what it is. But I
Right.
think it's all about widening the viewpoint of what everyone's experiencing, so that way you can kind of make it an open and inviting place for people to come in and kind of experience what we've all experienced who have been involved in the game for the last decade or so, if not way
Yeah.
longer. You know what I mean?
I believe it, man. Dude, when I was doing like the funk volume thing, like you had me, you had a gentleman from Deloitte, you had another gentleman with an accounting background, right? Like very diverse, bro. And then you got musicians. So I think it's when you have those things is what makes you muscular, right? Like everybody's not saying the same thing, looking at the same lens. Um, I'm a very collaborative person, so I welcome that kind of stuff, and especially because I don't have some of the same tools in my toolbox that most MBAs or other stuff would. So I welcome that. You know what I mean? I think it's cool. You got to be able to. You got to be a team player in this game. I mean, it's team player within your organization, team player at the partner level, right? Playing with your media partners, marketing partners, in-store servicing team, and retailers. Man, I share as much as I can. I share as much information as I can, and I try to lift what I can. And I feel like if you do those things, you set yourself up.
And that's like I think the one of the biggest things that people can pull from the episode in general is a couple different points. I mean, the whole thing is filled with game, but like the couple different points is, you know, everyone at some point had to get a hand put back to them so that they could come forward. So like pay it forward, right?
Yep.
It's being open to collaborating, and it's being a sponge, dude. Because like the number one thing I think from your story that is like of appeal or should be of appeal, I think, to anyone, whether you're trying to get an internship or you're even at the executive level, is like be a sponge in anything that you do, because you don't know where you're going to learn the next thing that's going to make your company different. And being open to that is what makes all the difference, because there's a million ways to scale a mountain, but you never know what's going to teach you how to take the quickest way up.
That's right. That's right.
Hmm.
I would just add to that, man, because I know we sprinkled in community. Community is probably the most important thing. Our community does a great job of smelling out outliers that don't belong, that are faking the funk to be here. Just participating in the BOGO, and then they're gone, right? They're not really here. They're not part of the community. And I like to believe that I'm a student of community. I am not community, which means I say that always because if you want to be in these communities, like I remember, I'll leave it here, but I was working with an outfit one time, and they couldn't understand why their sales were down in a certain territory, and it's because they were sending in someone to that territory that didn't speak the language of that territory. They're from a different city. They're going into a territory that maybe may not be on the same per capita
Yep.
income. Maybe they party differently, and so when you go into those areas and you speak in a different language, you're not gonna have success. But you have to give and adapt yourself and be a part of these communities that you're trying to get your products into. You're building up retail, whatever your mission is. You got to really be an honest like student of that community, and then it never goes away. You got to be a steward. You
Hmm.
got to represent that community, and support is, I feel like, another reason why I love working with some of these humble brands, from Ursa down to, like, where I'm at now. Scott, if you ever see pictures, Scott's there in the trenches with me, right? And I can't tell you how incredibly awesome that is. 'Cause even for me, every time I see it, is because folks are like, "You're the farmer?" You know what I mean? Down in Long Beach, you get to meet the farmer from Humboldt, right? You're in Stanton, you get to meet the gentleman from Humboldt, right? You're in Ventura, you get to meet the gentleman from Humboldt, right? Inland Empire, San Diego. You're like, what? Crazy, right? It's crazy. So
That
I
is
really
crazy.
believe that you gotta be engaged with the community somehow, and it's got to be deeper than BOGOs and throwing price breaks.
I totally agree, man. I think, that is, and across all of the episodes that we've had so far, it has been like the one absolute. I feel like marketing is one of those things where there's like universal truths in some ways, and then there's other things that have a lot of nuance to them. And the one absolute strongest through line between all episodes is that you have to approach things with a point of being genuine, being curious, and trying to be understanding of the other side of things. Because, like you said, people sniff that shit out immediately. There's no willingness to be able to want to do business with somebody who doesn't try to understand you at minimum. And
Yep.
I think the biggest thing is that people should know that people like to buy things from people that they like. And that's just hardline truth. At the end of the day, that's what it is. I'm not going to buy from somebody who I don't like unless they have the only solution that I need. Um, and so, yeah, man, I think amazing salient point. Like, the being a student of the community is something that you absolutely need to approach if you want to get involved with that community, because there's no if, ands, or buts around it, right? You're not just going to step in and say, buy something from me and make money. That's not it. I
Right.
mean, if that was the case, then, everybody would be millionaires, because everyone's trying to hawk something. Um, you know?
Yeah,
So yeah, man. Man, let me just say I appreciate your time, man. It has been fantastic talking to you, dude. I really do hope we stay in touch. I know
absolutely.
we will. I mean, this is like the smallest industry in the world. Um, Tell the good people where to find you.
Oh man, LinkedIn's probably the easiest place to find me unless you're in LA. Just ask around. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Dee Sidhu. Pretty easy. Think I'm the only one. You can find our brands on Instagram at Humboldt Family Farms. We're stocked in the state, across Culture and Bark. We're in Spark. I think, we're talking to some other great folks in and around the areas. But we're on Flower Coast. If you want to try our products, make sure you stop in those fine locations. Let them know I sent you. And if you ever need a hand, just let me know. I'm always down to help. That's what me and Scott do.
Man, and that is appreciated far and wide in the industry. On my end, man, you can find me on Instagram at Nigel Despinasse. I know it's a hard last name, but if you put DES, it'll probably show up. Nigel D's on all socials. And man, join us every week for a different episode of Beard Bros Network. We're here to bring you guys some good news, some good perspectives. And yeah, I appreciate it. D, once again, man, I appreciate your time.
Likewise, bro. Salute Beer Bros, man.
Salute, man. We appreciate it more than you know. All right, signing off, everybody. Thank you.